Thanks very much. Let me just say right now that you have entered the British contingent part of the program, okay? Hi, I'm Anne. I'm going to talk about reinventing organization, but before I do that, I'd just like to show you a quick film. If you could play the film, please. Now you'll see from that there are a lot of different ways to organize. You know, there are beautiful ways, they are fascinating ways, they are dynamic ways. And I'm here to talk about how we can reinvent organizing. And yet, if I were to say to you, right, the next 15 minutes are going to be about organizational development, I could probably, the energy would just drop in the room, you know, because the word organization has a lot of baggage with it. It has baggage like this. You know, it's about systematic management procedures and Excel spreadsheets and time you're not going to get back and big fat files you're not going to read, and it is labored and it is boring and it is dull and it is very mechanical. But the interesting thing is that organizations, when they first came into being, the kind of medicine that we had was about as sophisticated as this. You know, we have moved on, and organizational development has not moved on. That guy probably only had an ingrowing toenail, you know? And he probably wanted to walk again, but he lost a leg because of the crude nature of the techniques, and he probably only had a blade between his teeth and a shot of whiskey to keep him company. And that was how it was then, and there is an opportunity to think about things in a new way. We lost a lot of vitality and we lost a lot of potential when we were doing surgery like that. And I think that the organizational development that we do now potentially loses a similar amount of the same thing. It strikes me that when we look at how we have evolved technologically, there is so much more we know now about how we can organize that we didn't know in the past. We know about our minds. We know about how our minds work. We know that we are able to learn a lot more about the environment around us. We know how we're able to organize, and the information that we have at our disposal tells us more about that and gives us insights and wisdom that we never had before. So maybe it's time to think again about the way that we do what we do when we come together and how we think about collecting. When I was growing up, one of the people that inspired me the most was this guy. Does anybody not know who he is? Hands up if you know who this man is. Okay, so he's an honorary Brit, all right? He's called Sir David Attenborough. He is a naturalist and a broadcaster. And his programs regularly get audiences, which in our tiny country is a big deal, of about 10 million people. And what he did when I was growing up was he brought the wonder of the natural world into our living rooms. He hung out with all the different species that he could find, continent after continent after continent. He gave us insights about the way they did things that told us stuff about ourselves. And he opened a window into a world full of rich diversity and possibility that none of us had ever really experienced before. Well, that's really interesting, but what has it got to do with how we organize? In the words of Monty Python, who you may or may not know, what did David Attenborough ever do for us? Well, I think he did something incredibly important in this area. He taught us that basically diversity equals sustainability. We need diversity in the way that we organize in order to have a richness of life. We need to be able to embrace that difference in terms of different organizational groups in order to have a sustainable culture. And that's critically important. The question that I have when you look at this and you look at how we tend to organize and all the very established and orthodox ways we do it is concerned is, are we really capitalizing on that kind of diversity to help our organizations flourish and grow? There is an awful lot more, I think, that we could potentially do there. 10 years ago, almost to the day, just up the road from here, the former President Bill Clinton and Prime Minister Tony Blair announced that the first map of the human genome had been created. And I think that's very telling, because now what we have is DNA as a concept which has filtered into human everyday language. Everybody knows about DNA. Everybody really understands it's a big part of the way we think of ourselves. And I think that it's just as appropriate too also for organizations that there is this double helix as we have in the human genome. We have the helix, which is all the people who are part of the organization, and we have the thread, which is the unifying idea that brings them together in the other. DNA in a corporate sense, I would say it stands for differentiating nation's advantage. It's the stuff that an organization does in its own way that no other organization could do. And if we are the sum total of our interactions, which we are, so are our organizations. We know from biology and from science that every human is their own cultural ecology. They have, each one of us has a series of bacteria which outnumber us by a factor of 10 to 1 and are our own unique constituency. So if we apply that to organizations too, we really have an opportunity to embrace the ecologies of our organizations and to really relish the fact that each one is different and to start to think about how we organize in a completely different way. The fingerprint of each organization has never been more important, because the web is asking for transparency, it's asking for sustainability, it's asking for ways that individual organizations can perpetuate themselves, and to do so in an efficient way, in a way that can be self-regulated, and that is really developing uniqueness, complexity, this competitive positioning that we wouldn't have without it. And it's a very primal thing that we're connecting to when we think about organization in this way. Because as human beings, the one thing that we have in common above all else is even before we were born, we were made to connect. That's something that is never going to change. We live our lives online now. We're looking for memorable experiences as part of that connection, which can really make the whole purpose of coming together and organizing much more fulfilling and enjoyable. And, great ideal, but does it really add up to a bottom line? Where is this going to in terms of the hard numbers? Well, what I think is particularly fascinating in all of this is that some Forrester research done only last month has said that despite all of that, 67% of customers say that their online experiences are an emotional void. As much as people, again, they look to user-generated reviews and to trust them before they will buy and make purchase decisions. And they also say that user-generated content is the most trustworthy type of media that there is. So there is a big gap here between what we're saying that we want and what we're actually delivering in terms of our organizations. And some organizations really get this. Facebook is one of them. And Kez was talking earlier about the difference between like and want. And the whole like open social graph system is really starting to make something out of these connections. It's starting to make something out of the fact that affinities, what moves us, they are stronger than any kind of structure that we've ever put together before. So what happens when organizations start to think in that way? They go from thinking mechanically to thinking biologically. And what biological organizations do not need is they do not need a strategic working party. They do not need pre-planned KPIs. They do not need regimented processes. They do not need big fat files. And they don't need bullet point slides like this one, which, by the way, is all based on guesswork anyway. So if an organization says to you, well, we have a 3 to 5 year plan, I certainly wouldn't trust that, because it has always ever been guesswork and nothing else is really going to change. What they do need is a sense of the real-time data impulses that they can get from technology today. They need a sense of the new landscape that all of that data is giving us in terms of the environment in which these organizations will thrive. They do need information-led evolution. And, well, that's interesting. And are there any examples like that around? Well, I'm going to show you a couple right now. The first one I have to say is TED. We are doing this. We are organizing in a biological way. TED has no beginning, middle, or end. It's a brand which is totally the sum of everything that people make it. So it roams around the world in different events, in different manifestations, and it is the people that contribute the ideas, the people that share the passions that make that what it is, always fluid and changing in real time. Something a little bit closer to my heart locally is I'm a trustee of the Child's Eye Foundation, and the Child's Eye Foundation is a charity helping baby abandonment in Uganda. And it is the brainchild of a woman with an absolutely infectious vision, Lucy Buck. And it is that infectious vision in an unstructured environment that allows supporters to give time and money and love to help achieve the goals of the Child's Eye Foundation. People love being involved and finding out what they're capable of doing together as much as what they're capable of doing for the cause of the charity. And we're able to use all of that insight, all of that smarts to achieve some really interesting technological things like the Buy a Brick Wall, which is an interactive wall where people can buy a brick and they can put their own inscription on the brick. And we were lucky to have Stephen Fry, another honorary Brit, Stephen Fry, who gave a donation to us and cited Pink Floyd with his all in all, I'm just another breeze block in the rampart. We are doing this together. And one day we hope all charities will be made this way. If you like your biology in the fast lane, well, Formula One is a roving global vortex of interest where people feel the need for speed in different countries, different teams, different constructors, different drivers. There is no end to the variety of ways that people can start to connect with Formula One all around the world. And the Cafe Direct brand is a terrific brand which talks about the grower network that it represents, 14 countries, looking at the resource of coffee and putting that as products onto the shelf, but doing it ethically, sustainably, and it has growers on the board and it gives 50% of its profits to those growers. So everybody's involved in new ways of harvesting something, new ways of bringing that to a bigger audience and being able to keep the whole thing in touch. Somebody pretty smart who works for a company that's doing reasonably well, Hal Varian at Google, has put it like this. He said, whether it's mining your personal biology or building maps from shared experiences, the ability to take data, to understand it, to process it, to extract value from it, visualize it, communicate it, that's going to be hugely important in the next decades. That is no different really to what David Attenborough was doing by bringing insights into our living rooms, in my living room 40 years ago, insights that when we look at each organization and we understand it as a biological entity, just as in nature, where ants can thrive and not exploit and kill one another, that's what we have as an opportunity using the data intelligence that we have today. Biz Stone, who you may know as one of the founders of Twitter, said recently that Twitter has spent the last 2 years telling us what it wants to be. And I love that. I love that semantic approach, that biological way of developing the business. It is the potency of that which has given Twitter the growth trajectory that it has had since it started. And these economists, you know, they're onto something. They know that it's not just about the logic, it's about the magic of connection that we were all born with and that we all want to continue having in our lives as we go through this technological revolution. Umar Hark is somebody that I think has summed it up brilliantly here. Wisdom is never found inside boardrooms, committees, or spreadsheets. It's the messy human world that creates it. Be there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.